So in this video, we're going to talk about Sneako that visited Speaker's Corner, Hyde Park, London, and being confronted by two Christian men that want to get into dialogue concerning is Christianity true or Islam false, is Islam true or Christianity false. And it all has to do with theology, you know, what your beliefs are, what you stand upon, and where you can find truth, and is it factual or not. So let's get into this. Welcome back. This is Exodus 2:14, and today we're going to watch a YouTube channel called Revelations 22:13. The title of today's video is Speaker's Corner, Muslims bring Sneako to the park to embarrass himself, he knows nothing, featuring Ananda. Well, as the title suggests, Sneako at Speaker's Corner, Hyde Park, London, for, I assume, the very first time. Let's see what he has to offer, and let's see what I can do to break down this conversation, if there is any to be breaking down of. Let's do this.
Give us your views on Christianity, and we'll just talk about them. We don't have to debate. We can just dialogue if you like.
Okay, so what are you? Let's start with
I'm an Eastern Orthodox.
What does that mean? So a lot of times people say Orthodox, they start off by saying a place.
Yeah, because
People don't say I'm an Arabic Muslim, they don't say I'm an Indonesian Muslim, they just say Muslim. That's
well,
the number one thing I hear Orthodox. I'm a Serbian Muslim, what does that mean?
That's just tell me well, Eastern just refers typically to the fact that the East and West had a split in the schism in 1054 between what becomes the Roman Catholic Church and the Eastern Church. We call ourselves particularly Eastern Orthodox to distinct us from the Oriental Orthodox in Egypt, Ethiopia, Armenia, who we have Christological disagreements with. So it's just to point out the distinction in between, because they also call themselves the Oriental Orthodox. In Arabic, for them, Oriental, East, it's pretty much the same word. So we only say it in English really to distinct. In just normal conversation, we just call ourselves Orthodox.
Right.
Okay, so let's start with this, Orthodox. Well, I'll be very honest, I'm not a specialist in Orthodox Christianity, although I've come in contact with it while traveling, and I've done my research in the past when I was studying all different sects of Christianity. But let me tell you this, as far as I can tell, Orthodox Christianity just by itself as a religious offspring from mainstream Christianity focuses most of the time on liturgy, and that means it's more like a outward appearance. It has a lot of similarity what you can find in the Old Testament concerning a priesthood, and it is an outward appearance and an outward outing where people participate like it was back in the days of the temple. Not exactly, of course, but it's very similar in symbolism. Personally, I would say that yes, there is a good side to it, because if it split away from the mainstream church, what you can find in Catholicism, what is the false church of Babylon. It's pagan, but Orthodox Christianity also lacks a certain connection with early Christianity, what could be perceived as original Christianity, what Islam as a religion always refers to when they talk about Christianity. So this is going to be very interesting to see how they're going to get along. But the point that Sneako made isn't that far-fetched either. If you identify with something, as is in this situation religion, then you don't have to specify which branch it is. Either you're Christian or you're not. That is kind of what he wanted to hear or wanted to know.
It's just for the sake of making sure that it's clear what position we are holding to. That will just be Chalcedonian Christology. That will just be basic stuff like Theophysitism. So as opposed to their view of strict Miaphysitism or monotheistic.
I'm good. It's okay.
Don't worry, we're just having a little. Yeah.
You said Eastern Orthodox.
Yeah.
Caribbean Orthodox, Russian Orthodox.
I go to a Greek church.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah.
Just ask.
No, come. I wanna have a little dialogue with you, man. I'm not trying to.
What do you want to talk about?
I'm trying to hear your views on Christianity. You normally have a lot to say on your.
How many gods do you believe in?
One.
One God.
Yeah.
Jesus God?
Absolutely.
Okay, so who did Jesus pray to?
The Father.
Okay, that sounds like there's more than one now.
Well, there's
how can God
more,
pray to himself?
because there's more than one hypostases in the Godhead. There's not more than one God, because God in this case refers to the nature, the divine nature, as mentioned in 2 Peter 1:4, the divine finds this in Greek. So we understand there's one nature. That's what we refer to when we say one God. These persons have the nature. God is one in nature, tri and hypostases. But the hypostases aren't separate beings, because being is once again proper to the nature. So there's one being in three persons.
What's that word you're using?
Hypostasis.
What's your definition of that?
Person, individual subsistence and a rational nature.
They're separate or they're together?
Distinct, not separate.
What's the difference between distinct and separate?
Well, separable means they can be taken apart. We're not saying they can be taken apart.
Semantics.
It's not semantics, it's metaphysically different. Separation implies like this, I can separate this to myself, but a distinction just implies that there is a difference between two things without being able to separate them. And they...
Okay, so I gotta stop right here. So basically, why didn't anybody consider to give Sneako a microphone? That doesn't really add up. So we're hearing, what's his name again, Chris? No, I'm not sure. We're hearing this Christian brother, my apologies, I forgot his name, having a microphone while Sneako hasn't. So Sneako is like whispering while the other one is all over the place, and he's talking about from a more researched, you know, I almost wanted to say scientific point of view, but you know what I mean. It's more based on whatever you study, and then you basically just out what you know by studying, right? And you're sharing it, like defining and sharing definitions and all that stuff. But Sneako just wants to get to the point of it, you know, Islam versus Christianity, religion versus religion, you know, ideology, philosophy versus ideology, philosophy, who is wrong, who is right, you know, what point do you have, what claims do you have, can you back it up? That's basically what he wants to get at. Now, the Christian brother in this situation, he wants to educate Sneako. It's very obvious, and of course it's also for cloud. I can't blame him. I mean, it's an opportunity like any other. I think most of us would take it if you had that opportunity. But so to come back on this topic, what does that mean? You know, having multiple, you know, persons but just one identity. It's kind of like the same thing when they say, you know, one body, one mind, one soul, one spirit. You know, it's all overlapping in becomes one, and there is no, you can't distinguish it anymore because it's just one and in one unit only. You know, the body harbors multiple of organs. You can't say that these organs aren't part of the body, and that's kind of what he's telling in a very simplistic type of way, although he's over defining it that it becomes very confusing for people that don't understand it fully or don't want to understand it because he's word maxing the F out of it. And personally, I don't really like that because it kind of wants to put you in a position that you know more than other person and you want to prove your dominance. And it can leap over to arrogance depending on what you do with it. But the point here is very simple. Sneako just wants to know if you have multiple deities, entities, personas, doesn't that mean that there is an out branch of multiple divine beings that you worship? That it's multitude, not singular, and that's why he wants to argue about it, because, you know, Islam as a religion always teaches about just one, the monotheism stressor, but you can say the same thing of other Middle Eastern religions or philosophies from back in the day. You know, back in Egypt, originally, it was monotheistic. You have a lot of Persian religions, for example, that are monotheistic, that gave birth to the monotheistic within the Semitic traditions. So it's not just Islam as a religion in modern day times that just claims and is a stakeholder and concerning monotheism, because it isn't original in that setting. And many people would even doubt that it is actually monotheistic, because you can say that, you know, Muhammad as a prophet within the religion kind of also partakes in that rulership and that divinity, quote-unquote divinity, let's say rulership and authority within the God setting. So it's also participating, it's also actually off-branching, off-splitting, and adding to that number one. Many people do question that, you know, and there is a reason to it. That's normal.
Different insofar as their identity as Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. They're not different insofar as their nature, once again.
Okay. So, are you sure you believe in one?
Absolutely, I believe in one God.
Okay. So, when you pray, do you pray to God or you pray to Jesus?
Either or, it's the same thing.
Either is that means that applies too.
Yeah.
The language is already,
you can make a linguistic point if you want. The point is, I could say oh God, or I could say oh Jesus. I'm just saying there's not really a distinction between saying either of those things.
Okay.
It's like the difference between saying oh Ya Allah and Ya Rahman. It's just, you can say either or, but you're referencing back to the same being, right?
That's just two names.
Yeah, that's the point. And we're just giving you two names of persons in the Godhead.
You're saying two distinct beings.
See, you need to not say separate entities. These are distinct persons, but they are one being. So that's just not characterizing what I said correctly.
You know, I think personally, to add to it, from my perspective, the problematics here is very simple, and I think that will cover the entirety of the video. It's Muslims from a tradition focus mainly on the person that is well known through our history as Jesus, although this is a pagan name. to my opinion, you know, I'm not gonna go in discussion, that's just my opinion, okay, it's a pagan name. And they refer specifically to a man, a person, a prophet, a messiah, an individual, you know, a human being. To be very specific, the human nature, the person named, identified as Jesus Christ, right? Jesus specifically, minus the Christ. While Christians mainly focus on that Christ aspect, the Christ. So you literally got a split. You got one group focusing on the manly part, the human nature, and then you've got the other group mainly focusing on the divine nature, the godly nature, the Christ nature, okay? So there we got a split. When these things get intertwined and people don't distinguish it and then just see it as one and the same thing, it's an overlapping thing, you know, there is no difference either way what you use, what name you use to refer to it. And that becomes very confusing, because in the eyes of the Muslims, you're still talking about a human being, you know, that lived and died, you know, so to speak. You know, not talking about Christ himself, but I mean in general, you know, humans live and die, you know, they're born, they live, they die. And there is nothing divine about it. That is just part of nature, that's part of creation, right? And then you've got Christians talking about the divine nature, the eternal nature, you know, the nature that is closely linked to God, that is of God. And then you've got a problem, because how do you make one group understand that you're not, when you're talking or when you're praying or referring or addressing or worshipping or acknowledging that divine part, how can you clarify yourself when they are thinking you're talking about the human part? And that's why you've got a problem in understanding these groups get into conflict, because one only focuses on one part, the other one mainly focuses on the second part. You cannot agree on anything anymore because your POV is different.
So is that your contention, Christianity, that we're allegedly tritheists or polytheists? Is that your contention?
No, that's just why. That's what I don't resonate. It never makes sense to me.
Well,
I
I
speak
just
to people like,
broke it down.
Let me explain. I speak to Eastern Orthodox, Catholics, Jehovah's Witnesses, Christian Scientists, Mormons. Everybody has a different definition.
Yeah.
Whether it's a form, it's a distinct being. Jesus is God. There's only one God. There's three gods. There's the Holy Spirit.
Which Christians are you talking to that said there's three gods?
Oh, a lot. The Christians are never consistent about what they believe.
Well, anyone who told you...
I've heard the hypotheses. I've never heard
Well, that's the standard formula that it's been for centuries. For nearly 2,000 years, it's been our standard formulization. I mean, once again, I don't know any Christian who says...
The first time I've heard a Christian say, like, ask, okay, you believe in one God, and then he's going to say either or. If you played to one, you wouldn't use the word either.
I don't understand what you mean by that.
You said you believe in one. You say you believe in one, but you ask, who do you pray to, Jesus or God? You said either one.
No, I'm saying
either or.
Well, you can twist my language if you want, but as I already made clear, we're talking about hypostases. We're talking about the fact that any of them are God according to us, but we still pray to any of them as God. There's not really a distinction in regards that they are God. But there's no difference between that and saying you can call upon any of the names of your God and it's still referring to the same being. That's not necessarily a problem. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that sort of rhetoric is why I love Christianity and why Tawheed makes sense to me. The simple ideas of Tawheed, like that there must be, if you look around, something must have created everything.
100%. That is true. That is true. That's thinking for yourself.
Right.
100%.
So logic led me there. And then logic led me to the thing that what's the only non-corrupted book?
Okay, so that's a misconception a lot of people that come to Islam as a religion get into. You know, they adopt that mindset. They get convinced by that anything in the world that you see concerning religion and spirituality, concerning people and their practices and their ways, it's always that the other people around them are fake, corrupted, deceived, you know, ruled by the evil one. And Islam is the only, you know, piece of light that shines upon the world and that will save everybody. So they have, in a certain way, equally a salvation plan, you know, in a religious institute without having a specific figure for it. It's just a religion that serves as a way and a need to salvation, to find salvation, to solve the world. And they want to represent that light by representing it within the religious context. Now, it's easy to say that you can call that a tunnel vision and you can call that an echo chamber in the most respectful way, because what it does is it takes a part of society and it deems them and puts them on the highest level of what they believe, right? Concerning texts and scriptures that came out of a tradition and a culture of people. So they adopt it, and that identity and that belief makes them so right, self-righteous, and anything else that questions it or is the opposite or isn't similar in the least way is wrong. That is how cults are formed, if you think about it, in the modern day. Any cult is formed around a specific doctrine, a specific person, a specific set of rules and beliefs, whether they're right or wrong, whether it can be proven or not. You know, whether it's historical, has an historical basis or not. In Sneako, exactly like so many people that come to the Islamic religion, just adopts anything anybody says that has some insight in the religion by spending time studying, so training the mind, or aka brainwashing oneself.
It's never been altered, it's never been changed.
What the Sunnah tells has been corrupted. Uthman burnt it, and then there were 7 Ahrufs before. Then Uthman burnt the Quran, and then we only have 1 Ahruf because he canonized in the Croatian dialect. That's 1 Ahruf. So what makes you think it's not been corrupted when the bread is
All the information says that. That's what
your Sunnah
that's
tells
besides the point. We started off by saying, like, logic led me to this point. What's the one religion that hasn't been corrupted?
100%. When you claim God,
and also, what's the only religion that believes in the idea of Tawheed and of oneness?
The Abrahamic religions, the 3 Abrahamic religions believe in the idea of Tawheed. And do you know the literal definition of Tawheed?
Of oneness?
No, that's Tawheed in Arabic means unification, not oneness.
Okay.
Wahid means one. Oneness is also ahad. That means to unify. Tawheed means to unify. It's a concept of unification. So I don't know what concept of oneness you've been told, but Tawheed is not, by definition, is not oneness.
He makes a very clear point. In the Hebraic tradition, it's been written down that when they refer to that oneness being one, it is literally unification, unity. And I made a previous video in the Asherite Wisdom playlist, so if you want to check that out, you can come to understand what I'm talking about, going to the root words and the root definition of the actual meaning when it's used in a more spiritual, biblical understanding and context. So the oneness and one and unity, it can be used differently, interchangeably, and that's the problem with a lot of interpretations, that many people would go whatever they feel like is right, but not will fully understand the root basis when people were using it at that time. And you need to do the research, and you have to have a clearer understanding of Semitic languages and traditions to know why they used it and what it refers to when using it in the right context, in understanding and learning and applying.
But then I'll ask you about Tawheed. What do you mean by Allah is one?
What do you mean Allah? I never said Allah.
Okay, what do you mean by the oneness of God?
That the creation and Allah, there's one creator, and that we're all.
I don't disagree, but there is different concepts of one God. Can I claim Tawheed if I say I built a rock and this is my one true God? Can I claim Tawheed by definition?
Can you claim Tawheed?
Yes, that this is my one true God, this is my rock. Can I claim that?
Okay.
That's so Tawheed is not, so Tawheed doesn't mean Allah. Tawheed just means according to the Islamic concept, just means the worship of one God. So Christians worship one God. We also hold on to Tawheed. Jews also worship one God. We also hold on to Tawheed. So then why does it make Allah different?
Right, I'm not convinced that Christians believe that worship one God.
Why not? Why not?
Because as we spoke about earlier, I said, who do you pray to? You said either Jesus or God. Either implies plural.
Yeah, but the concept, you have to understand the concept of Tawheed. I also told you, please, I'm speaking to him, please.
Yeah, what it actually means is that, for example, in Mormonism, using that as a prime example here, they literally see that all these beings, these higher level beings, including what people refer to as God, all are separate entities, beings, right? And if you address them regardlessly, you kind of are addressing multiple divine beings, so worshipping a multitude instead of a singular. And that's where Sneako also projects that way of dealing with worshipping and creation and creator and beings. And he sees that equally as being applicable to Christians, that they use that same argument that all these different beings that they deem as holy or godly, divine, that they separately worship them. And then he wants to reflect upon that and say, you know what, that is not what the Islamic religion teaches, because it just teaches about the singular, the one specifically. Now, if you think about it very clearly, if everything shares a similar essence, right, the spirit, okay, and it's widespread in everything in creation, but it leads back to the original source, but is an offshoot. It still belongs to the original source. It comes from it and it goes back to it regardlessly. And that is kind of what that unification talks about. That's why you could say that, you know, the Christ was on a much higher level, you know, and then I'm not even giving enough credit, but much higher level than average human beings are. Okay? So that means closer to the source, closer to God, closer to the root, the origin. You know, so closer, going back to the unification progress. And that actually underlines the understanding. You can even prove it with a spiritual scientifical facts, you know, with spiritual scientifical proof. You can prove it. It is possible to prove it. They have been studying these things, you know, before the 80s. There has been a process that have been doing that. You know, the late 1800s and the early 1900 period was very advanced in understanding this life, creation, creator, the afterlife, the progress of parting, you know, not eternally dying and all that stuff. And it has been part of many cultures and traditions equally. That's why many ancient culture and traditions actually celebrated a death of a person instead of weeping and mourning. The weeping and mourning is actually a modern way of dealing with a deceased one, while it didn't came natural back in the olden days. Okay, and like I mentioned before as well, monotheism has always been predominant across the entirety of the world. Polytheism came later on concerning people and tribes and offshoots when they start focusing on different aspects and elevating it to a status of worship and creating so another idol or deity, you know. So these things already existed, but it's interesting to see that many people that want to claim religious righteousness will say, you know what, you know, we're just looking at the world now, everything seems very polytheistic, very pagan, you know, so since we only focus on one deity, entity, or whatever, then that must be the only one, the only truth that we should be following, and everybody else should do that equally, or they're in the wrong.
I also
What were you saying? I mentioned it's a conversation.
I know, but I'm having a conversation. It's an A and B conversation. I'm trying to get him to see himself out. You know, you said the.
Well, I'm curious about what do you have to say.
Okay, if you want to, thank you. That's the what I'm even going to say. I already gave you the concept of me building a rock, and then I'm saying that's my one true God, and I'm holding on to Tawhid. So he doesn't specify which God. So why is it?
Tawhid in Islam is completely different. Tawhid in Islam, I'll recite the verse where it says right now. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
Are you good, man?
All right.
I like the sound.
قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. So it says, this is what we believe for Allah. He is Allah, one and indivisible. So that means no idea of eternity. He cannot be divided into parts. Right?
Yeah, but when you say one, that's already a division. Because there's half of one plus half of one equals one.
Okay, so let me interject briefly. This is important. So that's why they have a major issue with Hinduism and Hindu practices. Okay, that's why there's a big conflict, because they see that also out of own experience when you had multiple Arab tribes, is that say that they cannot, well, they reject and they don't want to commit to seeing when you have a unity or, you know, a oneness or one, that it been split up in a multitude for characteristics and worship purposes that people prefer above one another. It's kind of a rejection. That's why they have a certain hatred or a certain, you know, denialism towards any organization or any practice or any culture that still does that, that still applies it or lives by that, because they see that as blasphemy. And they, you know, they see that in Judaism as a religion, or whether it was a past or present. They see that in Christianity right now. They see that in Hinduism. They see that even in Buddhism. Like anything that involves something, even if it's from the creator, even if it's from the source, but is an offshoot, it's always corruptible. It's always leading people away. It's like a distraction from what they should originally be worshiping or idolizing, because basically it's just always referring to the source, where there's nothing wrong with that. But there is a problem if you think about it in the context of religion when they're trying to apply it. Pointing to a source is one thing, but trying to define it in your own way, tradition, culture, and spiritual practices, whether there is a part of paganism in it or not, it's still something to keep in mind, that it's not fully accurate in its origin state, because people interjected their own thoughts when they were writing it down.
Wait, in
No,
what
no,
way?
but you use a numerical number.
So you cannot be divided.
Sorry, in what way is the Trinity divided?
That Allah is the sustainer needed by Allah, meaning everyone and everything needs
Yeah,
God.
he
made an
needs to
accusation.
know he's born.
Jesus
Needs
needs
that.
God.
You made an accusation. He asked you in what way
Yeah,
is the
he
Trinity
has
divided.
So I'm not finished.
Yeah, I know, but like, you
So
made
he has
an
never had offspring, right? So we do not believe that
Sneako,
God has.
Sneako, it was me and you
And
conversation.
nor was he born. Well, you said it. You were having a private conversation.
Yeah, but I know. I
Shows
didn't
your
want it.
dishonesty.
I didn't want it, you know. I didn't want it. But
It looks like you don't want it.
I didn't want
Could
it.
you answer in what way is the Trinity divided?
And he has never had offspring, nor was he born, and there's none comparable to it. So when we say this is by definition,
Surah 39 verse 4, it says, if Allah was to have offspring, you can choose one of his creation as consuls. So Allah can have offspring. And also the Quran tells you, if Allah does have offspring, then Muhammad will be, and the believers will be one of the people to worship. So Allah can have offspring. And also, I can't remember what surah where Allah breathed into, gave his spirit into Mary's Farjah. I don't want to be offensive, but the language kind of uses an offensive term as a physical thing. Yeah. So Allah did have a child, which is Jesus Christ.
isn't that in the Bible?
It's in the Quran.
No, but in the Bible,
No.
doesn't it say, like,
The
God
spirit just.
basically impregnated Mary?
No, it doesn't say that. Allah in the Quran says he breathed into him, Mary's spirit. Yeah.
Yeah, brother.
This Farjah is private part.
It always seems that Sneako is running away, but you know, the sad part of watching these three clips from Sneako in, you know, Speaker's Corner, I've noticed he's been always not really being very invested in the conversation or trying to get into debate or, you know, in the Q&A. It's kind of like just repeating something that you could perceive as basic, very basic. And then when he sees that people want to go into detail, he just bails, he just runs. And that shows a lack of interest, a lack of respect, and also a lack of really understanding these topics, these serious topics that people want to talk about and discuss. That means that all the people that were asking the questions here were definitely above him, you know, in the setting of religious understanding and study. And it's sad because if you're a big guy like Sneako, you know, you're an influencer, you have like millions and millions of people following you and watching you and you know, supporting you, whatever you do, whether it's Islamically or not. The point is that if you can't really accurately defend it because you always have to hide behind quotations, then you lack character, you lack understanding, and that kind of puts you in a position of being more of a fool and a sheep and a follower than actually, you know, being an actual leader. In this clip, Uncle Sam, as he's known in, you know, at Speaker's Corner, is gonna talk to Sneako and ask him a few questions concerning the crescent moon. And if Sneako is well aware that Islam as a religion kind of has a main focus point, basically Baalism, you know, the worship and the idealization of Baal, the confusing that deity, that entity with the one divine true God. Accordingly, let's do this.
Can I talk to you for a moment?
What do you want to talk about?
You know what? Islam, of course.
What do you want to talk about?
Okay, well, I want to talk about the
What's
crescent
your
moon.
stance? What's your stance? What do you stand for?
I'm Christian.
Alright.
Just wanted to ask you about the crescent moon on the top of the mosque. Have you ever wondered what that is for?
Yeah, no, that's we were talking about the crescent moon in Islam. That's kind of that's an alteration, right?
Yeah, that's not part of Islam. That came in during the Ottoman Empire.
Really? But why would Islam accept it though? Even if it has a, because the Ottoman Empire had Constantinople, right? They conquered, and the Constantinople was designated to the god Diana, the moon goddess, right? So why would you take the symbol of?
Well, I personally believe that's when the corruption started beginning. That's when I believe that Muslims stopped practicing Islam the way it's supposed to be practiced.
When did the Ottoman Empire start using that symbol? What century?
I'm not necessarily
About.
But like, because the thing is, Islam is a religion of Muslims. We don't believe in having.
Yeah, but you have the crescent moon there.
Yeah, but that's not at the time of Prophet Muhammad. That was never there. That came way after.
Okay.
So the thing that people gotta know is the crescent moon is, you can find that in many cultures, mainly pagan cultures. When I think about it, I think about old Egypt. And they use it as well, in kind of symbolized in very simple words, kind of a you know what I mean, like a impregnation, you know what I mean, like when seed comes with an egg and then you get that, you know, and it's kind of like creating life, existence. and it holds very specific meaning in many cultures. But again, like I said, it's a pagan format of dealing with certain things. Is very symbolic, and it's true that in historically, the Ottoman Empire is responsible for spreading it and using it as a symbol, or at least accepting it as a universal symbol to identify with Islam, their version of Islam, so to speak. But the question people should ask themselves is, if it's from the past and it was placed by a specific group of people that identified as being Muslims, why did they leave it? Why didn't they ban it? Why didn't they take it down just like they did with the crosses? There must be a reason why they're still keeping it up, right?
Well, look, it's not there for like a few years or something. It's there for centuries, right? And also, because here's why I'm really asking the question. Sneako, you want to know why the crescent moon is there, right? You said you know, right?
No, I was just learning about that.
Okay, yeah, we were just talking about it because I want you to just at least understand what that is.
Okay.
Because the thing is, he's saying that came with the Ottoman Empire when they conquered Constantinople. They took the symbol of the city, which is the emblem of the city that was designated by the Romans, right?
Yeah.
So if the thing is that symbol was with Islam from the beginning, because let me finish. The reason is because Quraysh used to, their main deity of Quraysh was Hubal, and he had the crescent moon. He was the moon god of Arabia. And the moon god, you know, Sinai desert, Sinai, it's all connected to Sinn, which is the god, Sin is the moon god from Mesopotamia times. Let me take you back. I'm going to connect all the dots.
So if Christians worship on Sunday, does that mean you guys worship the sun god?
That's a good question, okay?
Also, the 25th of December is also
very good question.
The
Okay.
birth of the sun god as well.
You're absolutely right, and I'm going to address it. But if you give me a moment, right? Since you're asking good questions, I'll answer them. Sneako, are you going to walk away, man? All right, come back. All right, buddy.
I'm a security, so
Oh, you're his security.
Security, you left him. Wow.
Oh, wow, he just walked away. Wow. One guy walks away, and then the other guys follow him. They all follow each other. So he just walked away, and he said, I'm his security. He walked away. And he asked me, you know, about the Christmas and about Sunday worship, and I was just about to answer because Monday is their day of the moon. And Monday is when the Quran came down, Monday is when the Ramadan started, and they walked away. I'm going to catch up with him. He said, I'm going to come right back. Let's see if he does.
Yeah.
He's run
Now we're
away.
in Dash, you know what it is.
Yeah. All right. Sneaking off.
He doesn't do anything.
Snuck off.
We love Sneako, but he sneaks out.
He just snuck off. Sneako snuck off.
Just looking at him, see how friendly he is. Sneako used to be that guy that's like, wake up, wake up, wake up, don't go into the and now he goes into some friendly. Everything's gone. It's ridiculous. I will ask this Sneako for a conversation. Be your own man, speak for yourself. Sneako runs away.
So my opinion on this matter after watching these two clips and the entirety of those videos mainly is that, you know, Sneako decided to choose a religion just like he decided to take the red pill back then, and there is a reason for why he does all those things. Many people would tell the audience that is watching right now that it's just him being his true self, grifting. If you watch the documentary, The Breakdown, The Annihilation of Sneako by Gokanaru, you will come to understand that there is more behind what he's doing that you see at first, and many people that are younger will not see the truth for what it is. But it's very simple. We live in a time when many people just copy paste each other. This like borrowed material. It's not original anymore. There is nothing original anymore about it. You just basically just copying and pasting whatever you find online, or whatever you hear, or whatever people whisper in your ear. And it's very sad because it takes away of character and your personality if you don't have a personal opinion. I think many people want to challenge Sneako because they want to actually hear his personal opinion like he used to do at the beginning of his channel and his career. He used to be very opinionated, he used to be very individualistic, and now he's just, you know, downloading software and going by that program, and that is very obvious. He fell into the trap. And what I want to add to it is mainly that he professes that he found a way out, just like Andrew Tate, to step out of the matrix, and what you need to do to step out of it, you know, being enlightened, being awakened, you know, being woke. I think it's very appropriate to use it, even for in his situation, and seeing the world for what it is and knowing what you need to do to end up in the place you want to be after this life. It's all very clear right now, and he wants to share that message. But the point is, he went from one prison to the next prison. He went from one slave owner to the next slave owner, symbolically, spiritual speaking, and that kind of puts him in a lower position on every level that you can imagine. And it's kind of sad, especially if you think about it, that he's, you know, quote-unquote influencer, quote-unquote role model, quote-unquote, you know, the leader for the generation to come. And this generation, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, you know, many people at a certain age are looking at him, looking up to him as a role model, just like with Andrew Tate. And if you fall in these categories where you have this amount of responsibility, it's very sad to say that when you yourself are trapped, imprisoned, misguided, equally will you do that towards other people. And there is nothing as bad as getting the majority of people that follow you just for you being you, because they like you, they're interested in you, they want to know what you have to say, they want to check your opinion. And if it's based on dogma, you know, is it based on tradition, is it based on that copy-paste mentality, then you're actually feeding them nothing, you know, nothing at all. It's basically just giving an empty bowl instead of a bowl filled with something of substance. And that is a very sad fact, because back in the day, like in the East, people would just mainly say that if you don't have anything to say, it's better just to shut up. You know, if you don't have anything of value, it's better just to be quiet. And there is no shame in that. We all have periods we learn. We all have periods we teach. You know, the disciple becomes the teacher becomes the disciple. Not anybody remains in a certain specific position. You know, sometimes we fall, sometimes we stand up again, sometimes we continue on a journey, sometimes we turn back and start all over. There is no shaming that. But with the pressure and responsibility you have as a social media influencer, being big online, it's very, very complicated. It's on a different level. But hence, like, the reason more to take it more seriously and not just to go over it like it doesn't mean anything, but just reflecting on these conversations he had, I would say that he has just an overall general understanding of what religion is, you know, what Islam teaches, and he's just filling his life up with that stuff. So what that means is he's filling his life up with the outward appearance of what Islam is all about, meaning the shell, but he's basically missing the core that is a spiritual essence. And you can go back and forth on this topic, whether you should be doing it with Islam or with another religion. The point is very simple. Religion wants to imprison you, wants to cage you, wants to keep you trapped, so that your internal light, your true self, the thing, what you're here for, that has to flourish with time, cannot do so, because you decided to put a cage upon it. You know, you decided to put yourself in a position that you cannot move, you cannot expand, you cannot grow. And even if you get you're receiving you have the opinion that you are growing in understanding and knowing, you know, knowledge, not wisdom, that doesn't mean anything in the long run. You can know thousands of things, you can have read thousands of books, and the end of the road you might have the opinion that you haven't learned anything at all, or anything of true value. And it's very sad to see that he decided to go into that route, because all these distractions, that is basically what they are, or just filling his head with certain type of nonsense. And it even goes for the Christian people in the video as well. You know, they might be perceiving themselves as being more righteous in their understanding of God, you know, scripture and life in general, you know, but that doesn't mean that they're 100% accurate just because they believe they are. And that's where trickery comes into, because talking about deception experienced by Islam in general, by Muslims in general from the past, that's like one thing, but biblically it did happen as well. The exact same deception you talk about when you talk about Baal, you talk about Murdoch, you talk about, you know, when you talk about Baal, you talk about Murdoch, you talk about Molech, you know, all these names for that specific deity, the evil one, has been called, you know, it's not only in Islam, it's also in Christianity, you know, it's also in Judaism, in the mainstream monotheistic religions that we came to know in the West. They all experienced a period of deception. And the problem is that when you perceive everything as wholesome and complete, and you adopt it and you live up to those standards, you're not going to question it anymore at a certain point. And that's where he is as well as a person in life, that he just adopts, accepts, and just fills in the blanks with, you know, concerning the questions he have concerning life and the afterlife and existence and the universe. And it's not because you feel comfortable with something that means it's the exact precise truth, because there is a saying that says where there is truth, there are lies, where there are lies, there must be truth. You cannot have just solemnly lies or truth completely separate from itself and then choose either and then be satisfied with the outcome. It doesn't work like that. That's not how life works. That's not how the universe works. The people must be more aware of it. When you decide to go on your spiritual journey, when you decide to go on a certain pathway in life, you got to be very careful. You got to be very, very careful, because many people will try to fill you up with things that you might not need, that are corrupted, that might be negative, that might be bad for you in the long run. They want to do that because they want to convince you from their truth specifically, and that's it, not about the truth. But many people want to proclaim a certain truth, but that doesn't mean it is the actual truth. But in their eyes, it is.
Please charge.
It is in their eyes, and in their eyes that is, but that isn't true, because that's what we're all about. That's why ego is very dangerous in these situations, because that keeps you from actually finding the truth, actually understanding and seeing it for what it is. But it takes a lot of time, and falling and stepping up again, standing up again. But that's the whole beauty of life. You get tons of opportunities to do so, but you can only do it by yourself. You can't do it by under influence of anybody or any organization.
Low battery. Please charge.
You can only do it by yourself. You can't do it by under influence of anybody or any organization, and that's something else to keep in mind. Don't be deceived, don't be fooled, because you might perceive it as true, but it might have been a lie all along.